Jesse from JDI, we're talking about superhero / supervillain type training, and today we're going to talk about big brute training. Specifically, we're going to talk about Bane. We're talking about superhero training or meta-person training. We're talking about building a broad base of general attributes. But if we're talking about supervillain training, especially if we're talking about someone like Bane, we're talking a little bit more about specializing in one area. Generally, if we're looking at supervillains, we're looking at somebody who isn't as balanced, right? Who kind of specializes in one attribute. He shines in one thing. And especially when we're looking at the comic book Bane, we're talking about somebody who's just a big brute, who just has a massive amount of strength. Yes, he's also capable in other areas. He's a very skilled fighter, he has some endurance, he has power, right? But we're talking more specifically about a power strength athlete. Because the supervillains in the comic books often specialize in one athletic area or athletic ability, the superheroes are more prone to beat them because they're more just generally fit and generally conditioned and just overall just better fit to fight and do everything. But sometimes you just want to focus on one thing, like being strong as hell and just burn all the rest. So if you didn't spend your entire childhood reading comic books, let me explain exactly who Bane is. Bane is a supervillain in the Batman world. He's an escaped convict from a South American prison who's experimented with a drug called Venom, which basically gives him superhuman strength. But Bane didn't just get to be who he was from the drug alone. He actually grew up in a prison because of the crimes of his dad, which, if you ask me, is kind of harsh. During that time in prison while he grew up, he basically trained his body. He learned how to fight, he trained himself to be as strong as possible, he got a hold of every single book that he possibly could, made himself as smart as he possibly could, and he used people in jail to be his teachers, right? He had teachers to teach him how to be more agile. He had teachers to teach him how to fight, right? Kind of like Batman. For a long time, Bane focused on all of his physical attributes and abilities, and later on focused more on just his brute strength. But Bane is known for being the man who broke the bat, which literally means that he broke Batman's back in half and put him out of commission for a long time. So when we're looking at training like Bane, we're gonna look at specializing a bit more in strength while still touching on other physical attributes and abilities, okay? So the focus is that we're looking at is obviously max strength, okay? From there, we're also looking at max power, right? And really not just max power, not just the ability to create one powerful effort, but to repeat it over and over again. You're also looking at rotational speed and quickness, because let's be serious about what Bane is doing, right? He's fighting, right? He needs to be able to twist, he needs to be able to turn, he needs to be able to throw a punch quickly, effectively, powerfully, right? He needs to be able to catch somebody as quick as Batman. But his program or his training routine would basically neglect other things, right? He would neglect general conditioning. We're talking about strength, explosive power athlete. We're not talking about an endurance athlete, okay? So although he will do some conditioning, right, he's gonna focus a bit more on just being as powerful and as strong as possible. So let's actually get practical and talk about what this actually looks like, all right? Let's talk all sciencey, right? If we're talking about building strength, the most specific way to do it, right, is through the max effort method, right? And that basically just means that you're working with big compound movements at 90% or more of a 1 rep max, or a hypothetical 1 rep max, right? So we're lifting heavy weights for 1 to 3 reps at 90% or above of 1 rep max, okay? The second thing that we're looking at, again, is max and repeated power training, right? So we're not just talking about heavy barbell lifts, right? We're not just talking about a power lifter, right? We're talking about somebody who's a bit more dynamic, somebody who is athletic as well, right? So he has to be doing jumps. He has to be doing jumps for distance, jumps for height, okay? Weighted jumps, right? And not just in a linear fashion, right? He has to be doing side to side jumps, lateral jumps, and rotational jumps, right? Okay, because again, right, we're talking about somebody who goes in a lot of hand-to-hand combat, right? He needs to be able to move laterally. He needs to be able to move in all different planes, okay? And then he needs to be able to repeat that over and over again. So we're doing stuff like alactic capacity training, that we're doing a high force output for a short amount of time, and we're gonna repeat that over and over again. After that, he needs dynamic power in all planes, okay? So again, like, this kind of feeds in where he needs to be able to do rotational exercises, or he has to do rotational exercises. He has to move fast. He needs to be able to move in all these different planes so that he can wrestle, fight, jump, run, okay? Last but not least, he needs isometric strength, right? This is what grapplers need, right? To be able to hold a contraction, right? To be able to grab something, hold on to something, or grab a human being and hold on to them for a long period of time. This also includes stuff like grip strength, right? So we need a program that kind of fits all of this. This one's gonna need some coffee. So when we look at the actual program, we would look at something like a 4-day-a-week program, okay? Days 1 and would address lower body, max strength, and max power output. And day 2 would address upper body, max strength, and max power output, okay? Days 3 and days 4 would just be about just general power, rotational speed and strength. So for day 1, right, we would start out with consecutive jumps for distance, right? These are broad jumps, meaning that we jump as soon as we hit the floor, we jump again, right? And we're talking about trying to jump as far as explosively as possible, right? In between that, we'll rest, we'll do a hip flexor stretch, about 20 to 30 seconds each side. And really we're using that hip flexor stretch to help our jump ability, but also to give ourselves rest here, right? Doing 3 jumps in a row isn't gonna be tiring physically, but neurologically, you wanna be able to rest as much so that you can do max power output for each jump, okay? From there, we would choose back squat or safety squat bar squat. We work up to a heavy single, leaving 1 to 2 reps in reserve, right? Meaning 1 to 2 reps in the tank, okay? If you wanna think about it in terms of RPE, we're looking at working up to about an 8 RPE or so, okay? So not a complete max out. Then we'll drop down 10% down, so take 90% of that top set and do 3 sets of 3, okay? Then from there, we'll do a hex bar or a trap bar deadlift, sets of 3 at 80% of your 1 rep max, right? Now, what you can do here is that you can alternate week A and week B, right? So on week A, you would work up to the heavy single in the back squat and do 5 sets of 3 on the hex bar deadlift. And on week B, you could do work up to the heavy single in the hex bar deadlift and do 5 sets of 3 of the safety squat bar squat. Then from there, we're gonna work on that alactic capacity, right? So again, that ability to repeat power, high power output over and over again with incomplete rest, okay? So we're looking at doing kettlebell swings from side to side, because again, he needs rotational power. And you're gonna do 4 rounds, 8 seconds on, moving, turning those hips as powerfully, continuously as possible. 8 seconds on, 15 seconds off. Again, 4 rounds of that. From there, you'll do the same type of idea, but now for the upper body, specifically a upper body pulling exercise. You'll do an inverted horizontal body weight rows, but if you have access to ropes, you'll use ropes. Bane needs a strong grip to grab Batman by the throat and kill him. I'm digressing. But we got 4 rounds of 8 seconds on, 15 seconds off there as well, okay? Then you'd finish up with a 1.5 to 2 times body weight sled push, which for Bane, that's gonna be a lot of weight there, okay? You would push that for about 20 yards or so, right? Do 5 rounds of that and do a 1-to-1 work to rest ratio, meaning that if it took you about 30 seconds to complete that 20 yards, you would rest for 30 seconds and then repeat for the 4 remaining rounds. Again, right, he is still conditioning, but it's a little more specific. He's not gonna have as big of a broad of a conditioning base as Batman. And again, like if you look at the comic books about how he beats Batman, he basically unleashes a bunch of villains on him and exhausts Batman for a whole month. Batman's working on putting everyone back in jail in Arkham, and then he finally attacks, right? So his conditioning, he knew his conditioning wouldn't outlast Batman if he just came at him while he was fresh, right? Day 2, we got plyo push-ups to a bar, 4 sets of 3 reps. Again, we're talking about the same idea of having lots of rest in between to make sure you do a max power output, but instead of doing a lower body power exercise, we're doing an upper body one, and we can superset that with straight arm hangs for 20 seconds. So again, we're using that as a time to rest, but we're also using that as a time to stretch, and we're also using that as a time to improve our grip strength, right? Then we have another superset here, med ball rotational hip toss against the wall. Again, we're talking about trying to move as explosively and hard as possible. Superset with some type of lateral or rotational trunk exercise, something like a bear crunch. You can do about 5 reps each side there, right? From here, we have a straight bar, or you can use something like a Swiss bar, a bench press or floor press. And again, just like we did with the squat, we work up to a heavy single, leaving 1 to 2 reps in reserve, and then taking 90% of that afterwards for 3 sets of 3. And then from there, you would have push press. You could do either straight bar overhead or landmine, 5 sets of 3 at 80% of a 1 rep max. And just like we did with the squat and hex bar deadlift, you can kind of alternate that, have a week A and a week B, where you work up to the heavy push press, a heavy single in the push press on a week B. And you do the 5 sets of 3 of the Swiss bar or straight bar bench press. Then we have our alactic capacity circuits, more specifically for the upper body here. We have a landmine band resisted press, 4 rounds, again, 8 seconds on, 15 seconds on. Landmine rotations, which is, upper body, but also mainly trunk. And that, again, we're doing 8 seconds on, 15 seconds off. And then we finish up with a heavy sandbag carry, again, working on that isometric strength, holding that heavy sandbag against our chest, and preferably if you can do this up a hill, be even better. Going up about 20 yards again, 5 rounds of this, and again, we're looking at a 1-to-1 work to rest ratio. For day 3 and day 4, we're gonna use something called a French contrast method, right? It's a really, really effective way to just increase just overall power output, right? The ability to create large amounts of power. What we're gonna do is we're gonna have a lower body French contrast method day here, and an upper body day here, okay? Both of these days are some of the lifts stuff are gonna be dependent on what you did on day 1 and day 2. So, for example, right, when we're looking at this French contrast method, right, we're looking at doing A, B, C, and D all in one basic round, okay? But what you wanna do is you wanna do 3 to 5 rounds of all these exercises. You wanna rest 20 seconds at least in between each exercise, right? If you feel like you need more to perform better in each exercise, then that's perfectly fine. Because again, this is not just about, it's not about conditioning in general, it's about power output. And between rounds, so by the time you get to a D, before you repeat A again, you would rest about 3 minutes, okay? So you do squat, whatever squat variation you did on day 1, you do 3 reps, 80 to 85% of that heavy single from day 1. Then after 20 seconds of rest, you do depth jumps, right? Something plyometric, right? Something quick, 3 to 4 reps, right? Then you do a weighted jump after that. So kettlebell or dumbbell squat jumps, 3 to 5 reps of that. And then you finish up, you can finish up with something completely dynamic, completely speed oriented, something like a sled sprint where we're not loading this heavy, it's a light sled, and sprinting as fast as we can for 15 yards, okay? Right, once we get through that 3 to 5 times, then we have a superset to ensure that we're a bit more balanced, right? You got a landmine curtsy lunge, you do 6 to 8 reps of that, and then you can do farmer's walks, heavy farmer's walks again. We're working on general conditioning there, but we're also just working on general strength in the entire body and grip strength, and walking for about 25 yards there, okay? Going through 4 rounds of that. For day 4, again, we're looking at doing the same thing, right? 3 to 5 rounds of A, B, C, and D, resting 20 seconds between each exercise and resting 3 minutes between each round, right? For A, we have bench press, whatever bench press variation, whatever bar we use for day 1, 3 reps, 80 to 85% of that heavy single, followed by a depth plyo push-up, okay? 3 to 4 reps of that. Followed by a landmine push press, 3 to 5 reps of that. This landmine push press shouldn't be too heavy, right? We should be able to move that really explosively, right? And then followed by a heavy med ball chest pass, throwing it out against a wall or to a partner, and doing 3 to 5 reps of that. From there, we're gonna do a giant set here, okay? Just working on just general strength of the upper body, but also rotational strength, and also just building some more muscle mass, because let's be serious here, Bane's jacked. We have weighted pull-ups, Zercher carries. You can do it either with a heavy dumbbell holding it there, a heavy med ball, a heavy sandbag, or you could use a barbell, right? Then followed by weighted dips, and then last followed by heavy band wood choppers. Again, working that rotational explosive strength. This is just a general outline of what I would actually program if I was actually Bane's strength coach. DC, you can give me a call if you're interested, because the actual full program would include a lot more things, you know, stuff to work on his specific attributes, help with his combat training and all that, right? But it's a general idea of what something would look like if you were actually trying to train like Bane. But if you like this, maybe I will write a complete program for Bane and other supervillains in the future. And if you do like this and you want to see more videos like this, like, subscribe, and share.
And do it right now.